And if you just give me a thumbs up, if you can see it, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So this morning, we're going to talk about sort of mentoring, and it's kind of like a mentoring one-on-one sort of, it'll go from things like identifying a potential mentor to being the optimal mentee. We'll talk about a number of things throughout, and I'm hoping this will be a conversation since we've got a small enough group. I always start every presentation that I do with a picture of my mom, or somewhere I put her in there because she's one of the wisest people that I knew. And one of the things that my mother used to say all the time when I was very young was that everybody needs somebody to show them the way. And so my mom was Miss Minnie, and that really is the essence of mentorship, right? It really is about sort of having somebody point you in the right direction, share information with you, make sure they speak you up in places where you don't get to go. They share opportunities and give opportunities to you. Everybody needs someone. And so one of the things that I would love to just kind of ask if you would, Victoria Flores, Dr. Flores is here from the University of Chicago, and she will be assisting me in this workshop. I'm going to ask that you put some things in the chat periodically, and then if she would share out some of those things, and or if you feel comfortable, you can also share them out. I would love to know what people's definitions of mentor is. So if you can put it in the chat, because I can't monitor the chat and do this at the same time. And so what is your definition of a mentor? And Victoria, if you will unmute, and if people prefer to share, they can share it aloud. Can we have just at least a couple volunteers?
I'll go ahead and volunteer one. So I think as mentors as advocates.
Okay, great. Great word. Advocate. What else?
Hi, this is Maria. I'll have to say that someone who's always not going to say everything you always want to hear. The honesty, I guess.
Okay.
Being honest.
Okay. So someone who is honest, who doesn't necessarily say what you want to hear, but says what you need to know.
Exactly.
Okay, wonderful. Somebody else. Now, this is going to be a mighty boring conversation if we are only two people talk. Don't be shy. We're all friends here. And this really should be a safe space, right? So please tell me, what do you think of as a mentor?
In the chat, someone has said a source of guidance.
A source of guidance. Wonderful. So someone who helps to guide you. Are we thinking about sort of an all-knowing, all-being kind of a person, or are we thinking about someone who sort of sits on a mountaintop, guru type?
I guess I'm thinking more so somebody who has a little bit more wisdom and has been in your shoes and is able to like direct you in the right way and help you kind of prevent some of their mistakes that they may have made along those lines.
Wonderful. Is that Aaliyah?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Aaliyah. So, and those of you, when you all speak, since we don't know each other, say who you are and what institution you're at.
Okay, so I'm Aaliyah Webster. I'm a freshman biochemistry major at Spelman College.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Aaliyah.
Of course.
Okay. One other person, please.
Hi, I'm Paula. I'm at Yale. When I think of a mentor, I think of a sponsor in the sense of not only would they talk about you well when they have a seat at the table, but that they would pull out a chair and welcome you to the table and give you a space as well.
Wonderful. Paula, so you said that this is a person who's not just sort of a mentor, who sort of does sort of this other work, the intellectual work that does the, speaking for you, but also one who allows you to have opportunities and sponsors you for opportunities. Fabulous. Unless there's one more person who just says, I just got to get in this conversation. Okay. Uh-oh. Source of guidance. Okay. So And so one of the things that I like to try to do is really talk about sort of when we think about mentor and mentoring, what is a mentor, right? And so there are a couple of definitions that I really like. One says a mentor is an active partner in an ongoing relationship, right? And so if I had been thinking clearly, I would have bolded a couple of things. And so one of the things that I would have bolded would have been an ongoing relationship, right? Who helps you to maximize your potential, right? So this is not about somebody else's potential. This really is about someone who has your best interest at heart. So they want to help you to maximize your potential and to achieve your personal and professional goals. Right, so I love that definition because I think it is so appropriate. There's another that I like. Mentoring is a dynamic, right? This is not something that is one-sided. It's not one way. It's a reciprocal relationship, right? In a work environment between an advanced career incumbent and a beginner, aimed at promoting the development of both. I really like that one because, right, it really talks about sort of how you would have seasoned people who would really be working aggressively to make sure that junior people really come up to speed, know the culture, and are able to fit in and move and thrive. This one is one that I particularly really like. Boyce says that mentoring is not dependent on personality. Now, the reason that I like that so much is because I often talk to young people and they will tell you in a heartbeat, such and such doesn't like me, right? I met people who challenge me all the time, and I just get this feeling that they just can't stand me. And, you know, one of the things that I say is this is not about personality. This is not about, you know, whether somebody likes you or not. And there are people whom I may have to mentor me who, quite frankly, don't particularly like my politics or don't like some aspect of me. And the relationship can't be about personality because there are some people, right, that you might just click with immediately and just abundantly. And they are not necessarily good fits as a mentor, right? And so the second part of this is what I think is incredibly important, but rather on task and activities that the mentor and the mentees do together. Now, that is not to say that you could possibly have a mentor who hates you. That's not possible, right? It's not possible to have a mentor who really just doesn't like your work, right? That's not possible. But it can't just be about personality. It can't just be about, oh, you know, we see everything alike. That is not important. And so I offer this last definition by a wonderful scholar that I know. And it says, a mentor is anyone who serves as an active partner in a mentoring relationship. In the ideal relationship, mentors and mentees are engaged in a series of conversations, activities, introductions, and collaborations that ultimately lead to the achievement of the mentee's career and personal goals. Mentoring is not dependent on a predetermined set of personal characteristics or even personality, but rather on the tasks and activities that the mentor and the mentee complete together. Mentoring is about skill development. I can't say that more than anything. If you are linked with people and you are not developing your skills, if you are not advancing in your career, if you are not making progress, then you have a friendship. And a friendship is great. But right now we're talking about mentorship, right? And a mentor should be helping you develop your skills. Mentors may be senior to the mentee or a peer of the mentee. The emphasis is not on age, but rather on their capacity to impart some knowledge or skill. What is important to remember is that the mentoring relationship is dynamic and reciprocal that works to develop both the mentor and the mentee. And the relationship provides career, social, and psychological support for the mentee. And so just before we push off of this screen, are there any reactions when you hear these? Is there something that you say is missing? Is there something that you say, wow, I never thought about that? Can you just give me some level of reaction for this? And again, you can unmute, or you might possibly just put it in the chat.
I just really like that these definitions highlight the reciprocity in the relationship, and that it takes two people. When I think when I was an undergrad, I thought I was just entering in a relationship where I was just going to be receiving something, and it was kind of one way. So yeah, one thing that I wanted to highlight that resonated with me was the reciprocity in the relationship between the mentor and the mentee.
Wonderful. I think that's a great point, Victoria. And the thing that I also want to make sure that people understand is that reciprocity does not come immediately. I mean, the reason that you get somebody as a mentor is because you need something from them, right? And so they begin to pour into you, but as they pour into you, eventually, right, the relationship shifts. And so I'll give you an example of that. I have a number of people that began to mentor me 30, 35 years ago. I consider them colleagues, right? I still call them generally doctor, whatever, or professor, whatever, just out of respect. But they have long since said, you can call me by my first name. But they also call upon me for stuff, right? So at the beginning, every time I had a job application, I would say, can you give me a letter of recommendation? Now they contact me and say, can you give me a letter of recommendation? I am being put up for an award. Can you do this for me, right? And so that is an example. That's a really good example of how it shifts, right? They now see me as a collaborator. They now see me as someone who can do things for them as well. So I've written letters of support and recommendation for advancements, for tenure, for awards, for a number of things. Okay. Anybody else? Any reactions to sort of these definitions before we push on?
I do. I mean, I have a kind of question that came from the keynote, just in terms of these mentoring relationships. And sorry, Wallace Sharif, Morehouse College. I teach undergrad, so I'm trying to, kind of gain some knowledge to pass on to them in terms of developing this. But in terms of this mentoring relationship, how important is it that the mentor sees the mentee as a whole person? And I know when I was in graduate school, my mentors, there was never a discussion about race or anything like that. They treated me as a scientist, and there was no context outside of that in some cases. And so is that something now that should be a part of every mentoring relationship, or do you kind of partition off, what it is that you need from that particular individual, and sometimes it's relevant and sometimes it isn't?
That is a phenomenal question, Wallace. Let me ask you just sort of a follow-up question. When your mentor treated you just sort of like a scientist, did you ever feel like, wow, there's something missing? Did you ever feel as if you needed something more? Did you ever feel as if I really wished we could talk about X?
Well, I ended up finding, the one Black basic scientist research professor, in the institution.
Right.
And we would have conversations that were about science, but were also about, he would complain about being the only person who, he would only get interviews from students when a Black student was interviewing, and so in that sense, we were able to share our frustrations, but it was a different relationship from a scientific one.
Wonderful. And so what I would say, just in answer to what you've asked, is I think people are becoming much more conscious of the importance of being able to mentor across difference, right? And to really be able to acknowledge what is going on with what's happening in the world, as well as what potentially is happening with the student, right? Or the mentee. And so with that in mind, I think it is incredibly important to be able to make a connection with people. Because typically, right, when people have mentored across difference, right, they find a point of connection, and the point of connection is generally what happens, right? So if you and I share a background, let's say I find out that you absolutely love Robert Glasper, you love jazz and I love jazz, right? And I come into your office and I say, oh my gosh, that's Robert Glasper paying. And we make a connection, right? Whatever the connection is, typically it's enough to cement the relationship, right? Because of some level of commonality. And I think that is typically something people have to do, whether you look just like the other person. One of the things that, so I'm gonna refer to my mother periodically through this presentation. My mother used to always say that everyone who smiles at you is not your friend, and everyone who frowns is not your enemy, right? Everyone who looks like you is not necessarily on your side, and everyone who doesn't look like you is not necessarily the enemy. And so the same kind of thing, I would never suggest, particularly because many of us are in spaces where we are the only, right? We are one of few. And so you will have to look for people to be your mentor who are likely don't look like you, don't share some of the commonalities that you do. But I think what you really have to push for is to find people who have some level of commonality, some level of fit with you, regardless of what that is. So it may just be, I'm connected with you because you're a brilliant scientist and we've got some great ideas and you spark some interest in me, right? It may be because I'm the only Black female and you're the only female of color in this department, right? And so that's a commonality. But I think that the major part is really on sort of how we make connection with people, how we maintain that connection. So that's all about relationship, how we began to work together toward a common goal. And that, I think, outshines most stuff.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so I want to make sure, I usually show this slide because it's really important that people know that what they are experiencing and what they are feeling is not unusual, right? And so common challenges of being a graduate student, a postdoc, or junior faculty of color, particularly in a predominantly white institution, but often just in any higher education setting, right? The constant pressure to prove that your research topic or interest are scholarly, or that's something a person of color should study. Right? How many people have had the experience where they have told someone, I am interested in, geophysics. And people are like, what? Why would you want to study that, right? Black people don't study that, or Hispanic people don't study that, right? How many times have you said, like I did, I'm really interested in looking at Black people. And when I did my master's, my work was on the contraceptive behaviors of Black teenagers, Black male teenagers, right? And people were telling me that I needed to have a comparison group of whites. And I was like, why? Because when they do white studies, they don't generally have a comparison group. Why must I, right? And so when I first said that, people were saying, well, that's not scholarly. Why not, right? All right. Feeling that you're constantly being judged more rigorously than your peers. Feeling like you are either always on display or constantly just completely invisible. The tendency to be hyper vigilant around your peers, other faculty and staff, feel as if you're being judged on your choices, never really feeling relaxed, a tendency for perfectionism, right? I remember once I had to give a colleague a ride in my car. And I am one of those people that I ride in my car and I have music blasting. So, I turned on my car and it just popped up. And the first thing you think is, do I need to change this channel? How many people feel that way? Enormous pressure associated with being the only one or one of very few in your department, and the extreme isolation that results from that. Constantly being asked to serve on every diversity initiative in your department or on campus, and rarely, if ever, asked to serve on any other campus-wide committee or initiative. Wallace, you just talked about that. Identification as the person to provide support to other people on campus with marginalized identities. Constant pressure to prove your qualifications secured your presence in the academy rather than you being the result of a diversity hire or selection. And then overthinking any and every microaggression or macroaggression that's hurled at you. Do any of these resonate with anybody? Has anybody said, is there one that I've missed? And just tell me what these elicit, because oftentimes what happens is these happen to us and we think, I must be crazy. And if you mention it to some people, right, they make you feel as if, oh, you're imagining things. But I assure you, these are some of the things that people have said. Does anything resonate? Is anything missing?
So I'll say kind of one of the things I see in junior faculty of color and in predominantly white spaces is not only, it's kind of correlates with the diversity initiative type thing, but it's also, you know, some obligation or connection with the students of color. And so since there's so few faculty of color, you end up spending a lot of time with students that aren't kind of directly supporting your research, and that might ultimately have a negative effect on your, you know, tenure or something like that. And so that's, I'm sure, what people want to do in those spaces, but they may also have to balance the cost of that in terms of their productivity.
Yeah, I agree. Possibly one of the students. I'm sorry, did y'all hear my dog? I was like, that was loud. And so I want to talk about some of the very traditional mentoring models, right? There's this traditional dyadic relationship, right? One mentor with one mentee, right? So oftentimes when we think about mentoring, we think about, hold on, see what that says. Okay, yeah, great and a sad list. Yep, it really is. So we think about sort of this one mentor and one mentee, and that traditionally was what we'd always sort of grown up thinking about, right? This sage, wise person who comes in and really helps to shepherd you, guide you, et cetera, right? The problem with that is what could be wrong with that scenario? What does that assume?
That one mentor can provide you with all of your, or can meet all of your needs.
That's right. And can you imagine how exhausting that can be? Even if you are just the brightest, most self-aware and most ambitious mentee. Now imagine if you are a mentee who has some level of deficit, who needs a lot of extra support, and who has very few other resources. Small group, where one mentor with a small group of mentees is having some joint sessions, but also potentially meeting individually with each person. Again, let's talk about this one mentor, right, with several mentees. Some of the same kinds of challenges, right, arise. Team mentoring, which is the two things that I've highlighted here are the things that I really advocate for. One single mentee with a team of mentors, right? Because that allows you to be able to look for the type of people that you need to be able to support you through what you're going through. It also allows you to intersperse people. I've heard a piece about Legos this morning. So it's sort of like the Legos concept, right? You pick the piece that you need and you put it there for a little while. And then if you need to move it out of the way, you can do that. And then peer and near peer mentoring, small group of colleagues at the same level or slightly above who work together and develop skills. This is something I won't talk about a lot today, but it is something that I encourage all graduate students, postdocs, junior faculty to do, is find a cluster of people that you can work together with and really teach yourself some things. So I am a huge movie buff and actually a theater buff. And one of my absolute favorite plays is a soldier's play. They also did a movie on it. A Soldier's Story. Denzel Washington is my absolute favorite actor of all times. You will hear me say, he is just too fine to me. I digress. But in that movie and in that play, he has one line that is amazing to me. He says, not having is no excuse for not getting. And I tell every young person that I mentor that, right? Just because you didn't get it, just because you weren't exposed to it, just because, right? All of those things. And there are lots of reasons why you might not have gotten it, might not have known about it, but just not having is no excuse for not getting. And so there are so many things that we could mentor ourselves on with our peers that allows us a level of support that we can move forward. And please, if at any point you want to stop me, ask me something, please don't hesitate to unmute, put it in the chat, and Victoria will watch that for me. And so the team mentoring, right? The mentee with a team of mentors. And these are some of the important mentors that I think you need to be thinking about, right? A career mentor, somebody who can help you think through your career. How do I move from where I am right now to where I want to be? How do I make those steps? This is somebody who is typically really very thoughtful, but also this is someone who is incredibly connected, right? Because you need somebody who can not only say, I see that you are currently at Yale and that you are in your first or second year, but after you leave there, these are the people that you should be trying to connect with as a graduate student. These are some of the types of departments you need to be trying to go to. This is the person who is saying, I need to help you to present your work at conferences so that we can position you to be able to get to some of the best graduate programs. This is the person who is saying, there are some opportunities in the summer that I want you to make sure that you take advantage of because this will position you. This is a person whose mind works about networks and connections. A functional mentor, somebody that's very task specific, right? Specialized content or some methodological expertise, right? This again is someone who allows you to learn something specific. Oftentimes when we have medical students, right? This is a person who is skilled in a way that typically most people are not, who can actually function and show you some specific task. They're able to help you to perfect it, but also they're also able to help you to move beyond that and to think beyond that. This functional mentor, again, when we think about sort of the LECOs, it's not necessarily somebody that you keep going to, but someone who is able to step in, show you what you need to do, and then they step out. A life balance mentor, somebody who is living meaningfully by finding balance between their workplace and home, right? And when I tell people this, oftentimes people say, well, why is that important? But you know why that's important. You have seen people who have had some jacked up personal lives, right? Now they are brilliant in terms of their scholarship and in terms of their research, but you know, their office is a mess, their home life is a mess, they've had a couple divorces, and you say, well, that is not necessarily, right? You need to find somebody who has figured out how to do this, and particularly as women, but increasingly even as men in the STEM, being able to find people who are really doing this well. And the reason that I say particularly women is because oftentimes we hear graduate students, female graduate students who say, I can't possibly have a baby now. What? I got to wait until I do, you know, these other things. And you have seen older scientists, females, who have not had children, who have not gotten married, who have delayed a number of things because they felt like they couldn't, right? And so you need to find examples of people who are doing these things and doing them well. You need to find people who are doing this. And let me just say one of the things that my mother used to say all the time. She used to say, you can do everything that you want, you just can't do them all at one time. And as soon as you figure that out, the better you are. And so some people may have to hire a housekeeper. Some people may have to hire nannies. And maybe as a graduate student, you cannot afford to hire a nanny, but you might be able to work with a number of families and you all might rotate childcare so that it gives everybody a break, right? And so I want you to think very creatively about how you get the support that you need, but you want to try to find people that exemplify those things. A scholarly mentor, somebody who is publishing and writing grants. You need to have someone that you know who does that well, because that becomes the person that you are able to then go to and say, I am working on this. How do I do this? Would you be willing to review my draft, right? Because they can give you real feedback about that. Your research mentor, somebody who's independently funded and who can secure funding to buy out a percentage of their time for research. You need to know someone who does that well so that they can teach you how to do it. Clinical skills mentor, when you're building a practice or you need assistance with a new procedure, consultation on problematic cases, you need someone who can serve as that for you. And then a pedagogical mentor, someone who can help you with curriculum development, educational techniques, classroom management. Many of your institutions will have a center for teaching and learning. You want to find out if you've got people there. That is a great place, particularly for graduate students, if they are interested in trying to find support around teaching, around classroom management. How many people have gotten a graduate assistantship or research assistantship and had no clue how to do what they were supposed to do, a teaching assistant, and had never taught before, right? These are the places that you find that level of support. The peer and the near peer work groups, they're generally small working groups, usually 4 to 6 persons. They meet weekly or bi-weekly. If you start to meet like once a month, that may not be enough for you. They share information, knowledge, expertise, and they work together. It's similar to a study group in which it allows the group to collectively engage in in-depth study, writing, discussion, and review of selected topics. People working on small groups typically learn more of what's being taught, and they retain it longer because they have to teach it. And in the process of teaching, it allows you to learn it more. One of the best examples of peer or near peer work groups are writing groups. We learned this from trying to complete our dissertation. A number of us were at the University of Chicago. Our mentor, Edgar Epps, was getting ready to retire. And he said, I need to get all of y'all out of here before I go. I'm leaving in the next 3 years. And literally a set of people from all different disciplines got together, and we started to meet once a week. We worked on each other's drafts. We provided editorial feedback. We also challenged each other. We gave each other mock dissertation and proposal reviews. We did that, and literally everyone who was in his roster graduated within the 3 years that he had set aside for his retirement. What I will tell you about that was that I was probably the second person that graduated of that cluster. And I continued to go to help support the people after I had finished for at least 1.5 years. What I will tell you is that none of us had any major revisions. I didn't have any revisions. The person who went before me had no revisions for their dissertation review, because we had grilled each other so well in our mock cases that they were just really good. It also helped that all of us were from different areas. So there was somebody from education, someone from history, someone from sociology, someone from divinity. I mean, because we had people from different disciplines, we were able to challenge each other and say, well, what about such and such? Well, you know, you said that, but I don't know what that means, right? Because the people had such different disciplines, they were able to push you for clarification in ways that people in your discipline may not have been able to do. With peer work groups, it encourages participants to be consultative as well as collaborative. It builds on the best practices of cooperative learning. It reinforces knowledge. It encourages participants to work together as a team. It makes participants accountable to multiple partners, right? If you are just responsible to one person, you are likely to be able to know how to push those buttons and to get out of things that you don't necessarily want to do. That's a lot harder with 3 people, right? Offers the benefit of diverse opinions and critical feedback, promotes healthy dialogue and debate, and it provides a sounding board to vet ideas. I can't tell you how important this really does become. And so peer work groups can be formed as writing groups, brown bag professional development sessions, research circles, reading circles and journal clubs, conference presentation groups, discussion groups with guest lectures, a skills practice group, right? So I want you to encourage you to be really thoughtful about sort of how might I set this up for myself. Again, the Brown Bag Professional Development Series, those are things that you can do. One of the things that we hope that you would do, since you're members of the Leadership Alliance family, is to really reach out to the people within our consortium, right? There are people in this who are connected with Leadership Alliance who'd be more than happy to work together as a collaborative and really work through some of these things, because again, you will be each other's colleagues one day. That's one of the reasons why you want to make sure that you begin to do this kind of work together. And so now we're going to work on some of the better and the more fun aspects of this workshop. At this point, we are going to have you work on your mentor map. And so Maria is going to put into the chat a link for the mentor map. We're going to spend 5 to 6 minutes. I'm going to ask you to complete the map silently, or, you know, if you can have your music off or your mic is off. If you need music in the background to help you to spur your ideas, do whatever you want to do. The mentor map, you're going to work from the center of the map outwards. Okay, so center out. Don't agonize over the selections, right? Right, the first people that come to mind, you can always revise this map later. At about the 5 or the 6 minute mark, we are going to then announce that you're at the 5 minute mark, or that you're at time, and then we're going to randomly assign you to small groups. The small groups will have, how many people do we have in this call?
1, 2. There's 6 people.
6 people.
Mhm.
So then we'll get into groups of 3. And then we are going to sort of talk through these 3 questions about only 3 of the people that you've selected. Sort of why have you chosen these people? What might you learn from them? And are there others that you might consider? Because again, the part of this map is that this is something that's interactive. It's something that I want you to think through, and you've got to be able to be very clear with all of these folks, why you've chosen them, what you might learn from them, and then are there other people that you have forgotten? The mentor map, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, I was just going to just ask, I didn't receive the map. Oh, that map.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let me just take a look and find it, sorry.
Okay.
I'll add it into the chat. Huh?
No worries. And so, one of the things, if you'll see, you are at the center. And so this is sort of where we're going to be looking for people to give you some substantive feedback on your work, people who might be able to provide professional development, people who might be able to provide a level of sponsorship, people who can provide emotional support. And be very clear, that is incredibly important to make sure that you've got intellectual community, a safe space to sound out sort of your ideas, but also a safe space just to go in general, right? People who serve as role models. Role models are not necessarily people that you have to be in regular contact with, but they are people who that you can look at from afar and model yourself after. Accountability for what really matters, right? Access to opportunities. And so, Maria, did you find it? If you did not, you can go to the NCFDD mentor map, and it should pull you a PDF that you can load, and it is a fillable form that people can utilize.
One thing I wanted to highlight that I've been thinking a lot, especially as you were going through your definitions, we tend to think of mentors as older people or more advanced or farther along that we are. But in this conversation and in Dr. Chapman's keynote this morning, earlier today, I think it's really important to highlight what your peers can do, like in accountability and in social support. When I was in grad school, my cohort was an essential part of my being able to succeed. And so also the importance of your family and your friends and your, other community members. We tend to think of mentors in a very, discipline specific and academic. Thank you. And, older, more advanced.
Yep.
But there are a lot of people that support us in our journey that can be, especially that accountability, the writing,
That's right.
grant applications, and social support can be a lot of our peers.
Wonderful. I agree. The other thing I want to push to just ask you to talk about a little bit about, you recently completed your first grant application. Right. And you got a ton of support from somebody we will not name, but who typically, when people think about that person, they don't necessarily think warm and fuzzy, correct? But tell us what that person did for you.
I will say, and that was my first grant application, not as a graduate student, but in general, I would say, I feel that I can say this as a woman in STEM, that there is this stereotype of the way that women, successful women, are portrayed and assumptions made about them. And just because people don't smile or write the long emails, people are busy, and there's a lot that in mentorship and in help that people will invest time in helping you complete a task. And that's really helpful, even if it's not attached to a smile, a long conversation, a long email. So people support you differently, and realizing the strengths of people and what they're willing to offer is just so essential. But I would also say, from another perspective, gratitude. Everyone's busy, and people don't have to do this, and people don't have to read drafts, and people don't have to meet with you. And gratitude goes a long way. I see it in my interactions also with students, when people, just send like a thank you email. And that, I think that also adds some humanness and some other, form of interaction that isn't so transactional and business and academic. So I'm ranting a bit of very different mentor relationships, but kind of thinking of your network, what different people can provide, and being grateful for their time.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so Maria has put the mentor map in the chat. Please take the next 5 minutes to complete that map. You have 1 minute. All right, Maria, if you can put us into groups and go ahead and put Victoria in a group as well. It's small enough that all of us can participate.
Give me 1 minute, please.
Okay. And as we go into our small group, again, we're going to take a look at just 3 of the people that we've identified. We're going to talk about why have you chosen these people? What might you learn from them? And are there others you might consider? The only thing that I ask is one of these people might be someone who is an academic, right? So some kind of a mentor academically. One of these people might be able to perform one of the other sort of emotional supports or some other aspect. And then you can choose who that third person is. Just be prepared in our triads to just kind of talk through sort of who you selected and why.
They're just trying to give me access to do it, so I apologize for the delay.
No worries. No worries. Maria, if you think the group is small enough, since I won't be taking a turn, what we might just do is do it as a round with the group that we've got. I just wanted to make sure that everybody got an opportunity to really speak in the 15 minutes.
Yep, okay. All right, they're telling me I could use someone else's room, so hold on 1 moment. Breakout 6, Corvette. Okay, let's go here. Okay. Okay, I'm moving folks now, just so you know.
And Maria, if you'll set the timer for 15 minutes.
Sure, I can do that as well. And did you care which room I put you in? I've only
whatever.
Okay.
And then make sure you go in one as well.
Okay. How do I move myself? Oh, I can't move myself. Hey Siri, set a timer for 15 minutes.
So Aaliyah, go ahead and finish your thought about you sometimes feel a little scared about networking and reaching out to strangers.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, it's really like just being, I guess, uh-oh. Yeah, it's just like it'll be intimidating at times to reach out to people, but I know like if I'm going to progress like professionally and academically, I need to like just get over that. And actually in my Designing Your Life class, we talked about that a little bit, and she was like, just be creative, send them like a little $5 card and ask coffee on me, can we like talk about some little opportunities and stuff like that. So I know there's ways to get around it. I just need to like mentally get in that field, and I know that'll really like catapult me and like open so many more doors if I just start reaching out. So I definitely think I can improve and expand my external mentors and increase my opportunities.
Wonderful. And I think one of the benefits of participating at the Leadership Alliance conferences is it gives you an opportunity to practice some of those networking skills, and it'll give you an opportunity to meet with people that you might not normally come into contact with, and you can put into practice some of those things that you have learned in this class. Look, you need to send me that syllabus so I can see what it is that you all learned in that class. I'm serious.
I liked what Dr. Chapman said this morning, because I think that it can be really overwhelming to reach out to people because we don't know exactly what to say. And if it's online, how to craft that specific email and how to like make that first ask.
Yes.
And the way that she framed it, and, just use that as a template, draft that, get some feedback on how you're writing that. And then you kind of always send a version of the same thing. That seems to, in my mind, like more doable than having to start from zero every time.
Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you for that.
Wonderful. And so we're just going to spend just about 3 minutes in your specific groups. What resonated the most with you? Was there any one conversation that was that struck you as being important? Was there one nugget that you heard that you say, wow, I'm gonna take that back? Excuse me. Well, I love the questions that we had about sort of community, right? Who is community and how do I find it, right? I thought that was really a great way. One of the things that I hoped is that as people began to fill out the mentor map, that you would have questions and that you would really push to see sort of how do I identify people like this. I'm going to share my screen again. And I want to just show you this. This is Chicago Stepping. I hope that you can see it. This is one of my good friends. Her name is Tasha, and she is a champion stepper. And this is one of her favorite partners. And it really illustrates for us sort of what the mentoring relationship is like. If you will notice, it is really smooth. Now, it doesn't necessarily start off smooth, but literally sometimes she's leading, sometimes he is leading, but it is like a dance. If there are ever any people who love dance, I actually love stepping, right? It is beautiful to watch when it goes well, right? There's a lot of trust involved, right? Because even though they are moving, right, it's something that moves over time. You really have to trust people to be able to do this, especially when you do things like flips and bends and turns where you are waiting for someone to catch you. But it is something that I think that is so incredibly important. And so successful mentoring always ends in skill development and
Right.
personal and professional growth. Yes.
Yeah, I really love that analogy. I just wrote that down as one, the dance partner aspect. And I think what would be cool was to see the rehearsal,
Oh,
right?
yes, indeed.
Like because I think what you said really matters is that it's messy. Mentoring isn't easy. It's a messy situation. It there's a lot of toe stepping. There's a lot of excuse me.
right.
There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of missing cues and things. And I think sometimes folks just see that dance at the
Yep.
end
Yep.
and miss out on the hours and of physical, mental, spiritual, all that pain and situation that happened to get to that point. So I was just thinking about that as you were showing, and I was like, that is beautiful. But Lord knows, I know there was some hurt toes in the midst of all.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you so much for pointing that out. Right. It has an impact on mentees' projects, and those projects positively impact their career. That is a point that I just got to make. Right. Again, this is about your development. If you are not developing as a mentee, something's wrong. It's characterized by high standards and shared goals. It begins as unidirectional, and over time it becomes multi-directional. And as Michael has mentioned, right, it can be messy in the beginning, but ultimately the successful mentoring looks like that dance. It is smooth. It's smooth like butter, right? It's sometimes task specific and short term, or it continually evolves over time. And I think that's one of the things that's the hardest for people to understand and to accept. Sometimes we get a mentor and we think this is a person for life. Some mentorships are literally time specific. It is a short time project and it is over. And you got to be willing to let it go. These are incredibly important responsibilities of the mentee, right? You got to drive the relationship. Oftentimes, young people do not understand that. That's so incredibly important. This is about you. You got to have some kind of an idea about sort of where you're going, but you have to be the one in charge. You got to listen and clarify your understanding. You have to say things like, I hear you saying, or can I ask a clarifying question, right? You got to review and reflect on your own time, right? This is not a therapy session. Oftentimes, Victoria has mentioned before, mentors are incredibly busy. They may only have 30 minutes for you. If they have only 30 minutes, you cannot spend 15 minutes kind of wandering and going here, there, up and down. You literally have to be able to go specifically. And oftentimes we tell people to take a short agenda with you so that you keep yourself on task and you can get through all of the things you need to talk about. Be willing to change your assumptions and change your work. That is probably one of the hardest things, right? Oftentimes we've got an idea in our minds about sort of what it should be. I will tell you the perfect example of this change your work. I had written a piece once. It was one of the first ones that I got published. I thought I had done such a great job. I sent it in and they tore it up. Mentor wrote all over in red ink. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on? And the hardest part for most of us is changing our work based on somebody else's feedback because you think you have written something well, right? And so it's the thing that you got to be willing to do. Be willing to consider different perspectives. Particularly when we talk about peer mentoring, that's hearing different perspectives. If you get used to hearing lots of different perspectives, you're much more open to hear it. Right? Use some kind of a mentoring tool to kind of keep you on target and keep your goals prominent. One of the things that we talk about is making sure that you know what your goals are. And then you work from your goals because that is a roadmap to what you're going to be doing in this relationship. Maintain a pleasant attitude and approachable disposition. I can't tell you how important that really is. You got to be willing to I always tell people to smile because it makes you feel a little bit more approachable, but that's just me, right? And I am not a normal smiler, but I know that when I'm going in and I'm working with people, I am very conscious of that. I want to have an approachable spirit, right? I want to make sure that I am not going in there like, prove to me, show me what you got, right? That is not me. When I'm in front of you, I am like, So tell me, how else might I change this? How might I make this better? What are the types of things what feedback do you have? I am asking for that. That is what we're asking you to do. We're asking that you ask for advice early and often. And we ask that you at least take some of the suggestions. There's absolutely nothing worse than having someone who asks you for advice and you give them tons of advice and they don't do any of it. Because then you're thinking to yourself, well, what'd you come to me for? Because if you were only going to do what you wanted to do, then you go ahead and do that, right? If what I do suggest is after you've gotten some suggestions, let's say you decide none of that works for me, you at least owe your mentor to talk about it and say, thank you for all of that advice. You told me to do X, Y, and Z. None of those really worked for me. And let me tell you why. This is what I have, however, decided to do. If you have done that, then what you have said to that person is, thank you for this feedback. This is what I've decided to do, but I heard your feedback, right? And it doesn't become, well, I don't know if this person, just wanted me to just kind of pontificate or what, but at least when you do that, you let them know that you've heard it, right? Follow through and do the work. Now, I know all of the people on the call are just amazing people, but sometimes we have to tell people that. We have to say, you got to do the work, right? If you say that I'm going to give you something by Friday the 25th, you can't call on Friday the 25th and say, well, I didn't quite finish it. Within your power, you need to make sure you get that work done. And if for some reason you are not able to do it, you need to contact them beforehand and say, this is what happened. This is the challenge that I ran into, and you need to revise that timeline. You got to avoid becoming cynical, especially in the face of disappointment. I can't tell you how important this really is. The research tells us that people of color in particular, and women especially, right, and that we often have lots of different challenges, and it is easy to become cynical. It is easy to say, this is never going to work. This is never going to work out. And so what I tell you is what the research tells us is that if you will continue to put in the work, if you'll continue to put in the work, you will eventually begin to leapfrog over other people because of the work that you've done, the reputation that you've built up. And so I suggest to you that instead of being cynical, think about it as this is just another opportunity for me to sharpen my skills. Let me keep pushing, right? Concentrate on skill development and obtain educational credentials. Because again, as you get certifications, as you get additional degrees, eventually that pans out and it will work in your favor. The research tells us that. Accumulate highly visible successes, right? That is incredibly important, to be able to make sure that not only do you get sort of these things, but then you've got to look for things, look for opportunities to apply for awards, because those are the kinds of things that get attention from people, right? Those are things that as students you can get. So these are not only sort of awards on your campus, right? But we're talking about national awards. In your discipline, every one of your disciplines has Blacks or Hispanics in biomedical sciences, right? Or in sociology, right? There are organizations. Make sure that you join those professional organizations, get active in those organizations, meet faculty of color and other faculty who are interested in your work. You want to make sure that you make those kinds of connections and you have visible successes there. All of you should be presenting at conferences. You're connected with the Leadership Alliance. You need to participate in the Leadership Alliance conference, but there are also your discipline-specific conferences, your national organization of engineers. You need to get active there, but you also need to get active in sort of the regional and the ethnic organizations. So Blacks in sociology, right? You want to make sure that you connect with all of those organizations. And you want to be strategic. You want to be very thoughtful about sort of what you are doing. You want to gain credibility throughout your institution. The responsibilities of the mentor. So this is really important, because sometimes what we do is we think that mentors are supposed to do some things that, quite frankly, they're not supposed to do. A mentor, is to help the mentee to build a network of relationships inside and outside of their organization. So As a mentor, it is my responsibility to connect my mentors with organizations, with people that I know. I often, Jawanda Grant is on the call. One of my mentees, I recently called her and said, I need you to talk to this person. I need you to connect them. Can you take a look and see if there are any opportunities at your research lab that they might be able to participate in? It is my job to do that. It is my job to make sure that that person is connected. As a mentor, it's my opportunity to provide opportunities for my mentees to collaborate with me and to encourage them to work with influential others. Encourage the mentee to take on more and more responsibility. It's my job to push my mentee harder than they might normally push themselves, not because I think they're lazy, but quite frankly, but because I see them and I know what they're able and capable of doing. It's my job to provide career advising and strategies to navigate departmental politics. I know what it's like to be at the University of Chicago as a graduate student and now as a staff person. So any of my mentees there, I can talk about sort of what they need to do, some of the people that they need to talk to. That's my responsibility to help them work through that. It's my job to publicly endorse my mentees' contributions and ideas and protect them when necessary. You need somebody who's not only going to advocate for you, but also who's going to make sure that they protect your time, sort of give you a place of safety. It's my job as a mentor to recruit my mentee repeatedly to higher positions, right? As I have moved up in my career, particularly some of my mentees who are working in administrative roles, I refer them to other roles. We are contacted all the time by headhunters. So it's my job to say, this is a person you should talk to. This is a person you should look at, right? As a mentor, you need to hold your mentee to high expectations and keep them on track. A mentor is supposed to listen, question, and draw out facts, right? I got to be as impartial as I possibly can, but I really need to try to understand the full situation. It is my responsibility as a mentor to provide open, honest, and tactful feedback, right? I got to be able to do that. That requires trust. You have to believe that if you ask me, I am going to tell you. And you got to believe that when I tell you, it is going to be from the heart. And sometimes, as Maria said, it's not going to be what you want to hear, but it will be from for your best interest. As a mentor is supposed to provide suggestions and advice on goals, activities, and progress. But as a mentor, I'm also supposed to keep confidences with the mentee, unless, of course, it is something that will hurt them, harms others. Those are the only two ways that I should not keep your confidence. Foster personal and professional growth of the mentee. And again, use some kind of a mentoring tool to keep track of the mentee's progress, right? I got to be able to see that we are making some movement. One of the things that you will need to know is that in order for this mentor relationship to thrive, mentees must use active listening. You got to repeat what you said. I think I've heard you say that I really need to look at all of the transitions within my paper. Can you clarify that a little bit more? Are there specific sections that were particularly problematic? Are there any places that I did it well, right? You need to ask clarifying questions. You got to know yourself and be honest as a mentee, right? You got to be prepared to ask for specific advice on your skill sets, but also your deficits. And you got to know your own deficits, right? Remember the from a soldier story, not having is no excuse for not knowing. Many of us, when we get into some of our courses, we realize, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do X. They got plenty of YouTube videos that show you how to do X. There are plenty MOOCs. There are plenty opportunities for you to take classes online. You got to learn and be willing to teach yourself some things. That's just the life. When I was growing up, my mother used to always say that we have to be twice as good to get half as much credit. Unfortunately, that still goes. You should expect that. And if you expect it, then you're not nearly as disappointed when you have to do it, right? But be prepared to ask for advice about your ideas, your plans, your goals. Rehearse being complete and succinct in your comments and in your explanations. That is incredibly important. If someone has only 10 minutes for you, you need to be able to get what you need from them. Make it easy for your mentor to give you honest and specific feedback. Ask for it early and often. That's where that being approachable and being willing to listen, particularly to negative feedback, becomes really, really important. You cannot take negative feedback as a rejection. And that is often what we typically do. We take it as they don't like me. They don't like my work, right? Oftentimes it's just, this is about the work. Because again, that's why we think about it as skill development. It really has to be about the work. Try not to be defensive when you hear corrective feedback. Thank your mentor for it, and then request more specificity. Thank you for that feedback. One of the things that we tell people is you got to be willing to say, thank you for the feedback. I know it is hard. Thank you for the feedback. You can practice that now. Thank you for the feedback. Can you tell me more? What do you mean by that? Can you give me examples? Could you recommend some resources that might be helpful? That last one, however, you got to be willing to look up some resources, right? So you might ask, are there things that I need to research more, right? But you got to be willing to do that work. The benefits, increased motivation and accountability. Effective mentoring increases your productivity. It increases your career satisfaction, and whether that be sort of the tenure in college or your graduate school, or even as junior faculty, it provides organization and structure for you. It's personally and professionally affirming. I got to brag on one of my mentors this week. Within the last 3 weeks, she has found out that she has won 4 pre-dissertation awards, not just one, but 4. She won a NSF one. She won, let's see, she won one from her school. She won one from another organization that does research in the rural South, right? I was like, man, it was amazing, right? And I don't take any of the credit because all I did was write letters of recommendation. She has done some amazing work, but it has been a pleasure to work with her because whenever I come anywhere near New Orleans, she drives from her school. She's at LSU. She drives to see me, right? She has driven to Chicago because for other stuff and made sure that while she's here, she sees me. She calls me on the phone regularly. She keeps up with me. She sends me notes, right? Whenever I'm thinking about stuff and I meet people and I need to connect her with them, I do, right? The thing that I guess you also need to understand and be clear about is that while you might think about people, because we did that mentor map, as people who potentially as mentor, you got to know that the mentors actually choose you. Right? I get a number of requests from people all the time to mentor them, and that's really nice. And I think that's great. But I mentor very few people. One, because I have very little time. And so if I decide that I'm going to connect with you, it's because I'm going to put a substantial amount of time and energy into you. So mentors really do choose people. And so you can't be offended if somebody doesn't, right? That is a piece that's not written here that you got to keep in mind. But part of it is connection. When we first started, we talked about, are there ways to connect with people and to form a real bond? That is one of the best ways, right? The thing that struck me about this young lady when I first met her was that she was just hungry for information. And that touched me. And she was a first generation student like I had been. And because of that, I was like, everything that I can do, I need to do for this chick, right? And she has gone beyond sort of my wildest imagination. But I did need to make sure that I tell you that, because what might happen is you meet people and you say, well, this is a person that I want to be my mentor. That means that it's a relationship and you got to cultivate that relationship. And once you do that, it's possible that you'll be selected. This will increase your leadership skills, right? One of the things I think Aaliyah mentioned, I'm a little kind of hesitant about sort of reaching out to network. The more she does it, the better she will get at it, right? And that is a leadership skill, right? It gives you an opportunity to test that out. It'll build your professional reputation. and it offers access to distinguished colleagues in your field. That becomes incredibly important, and we want to make sure that we do that. Sort of final thoughts. You want to find peers, faculty, administrators, and staff that can help you to strategize, role play your talking points, review your work. Look beyond academia for mentors. You can look for clergy, coaches, business leaders, relatives. I can't tell you more about this second one. I can't tell you it enough. Vent and whine to your friends, your classmates, your therapist, or a life coach. I tell people, most people, you know, we've grown up through some challenging times. Almost everybody that I know needs a little couch time. You should not be embarrassed. You should not be hesitant. If you need to get some therapy, you need to get it. Everybody here is either employed or they're in school, and their schools have therapists. Please reach out if you need to. Aggressively pursue collaborative projects, challenging clinical cases and research problems. As you work closely with people, you'll get a really good sense of who might be a good mentor, right? Because there will be somebody that is prickly that you might not be able to work with. If you find people like that, it won't matter if they are a great scientist, right? If you can't connect with them, they might not be a good fit. Remember that mentoring is a relationship, and all relationships need to be nurtured. All relationships require communications. All relationships require reciprocity. Become and stay active in your professional and student organizations. I can't emphasize that more, because that's where you get a chance to practice some of this. And then lastly, I think we just heard about gratitude, right? You got to be willing to say thank you often. I regularly just connect with my mentors and I just say thank you. Sometimes I just send a little thank you note for people who helped me years ago, just so that they know what I'm doing. I connect with people who served on my dissertation committee, and I just send them a note and say, with my CV, and say, I just wanted you to know what I've been doing. And I just want to thank you for taking the time and for investing me way back then, right? It makes people, one, keep you in mind, but also when they have opportunities, they will refer them to you, but also it just lets people know that you appreciate them. I've got some references for you. I'm sure that Maria is going to give you a copy of this presentation, but the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity is an excellent resource. Many of your institutions have institutional memberships, and so therefore you can click on that link and you can have access to a number of their podcasts and other resources, particularly if you are writing or you're a medical or a postdoc or graduate student. Here are some books that are great resources and early career faculty. The books in red are the ones that I really, really recommend for folks, particularly even if you are just an undergraduate. If you've got a great paper that you've written, that you have gotten a lot of really good feedback, I would ask you to consider thinking about trying to write and get a journal article. Writing your publishable article in 12 weeks. It's in its second edition. It's by Wendy Belker. Belker is at Princeton, I believe. It's an amazing workbook. If you work through a paper that you've written that you've gotten an A on, that you really want to try to transform into an article, I can't encourage you more. The sooner you start to publish, the better, just because it makes it a lot easier to go through the review process if you have done that. Those of you who are working in the STEMs, writing an effective grant application is incredibly important. The faster you learn this process earlier in your career, the better it is for you. And then sort of what you want in a mentor is someone who truly cares for you and who will look after your interests and not just your own, not just their own. When you do come across the right person to mentor you, start by showing them that the time that they spend with you is worthwhile. Any sort of final questions, comments, anything in our last 2 minutes?
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to say thank you so much. Like, this was everything. I really gained so much valuable information, and like I really feel like I know where to go from here when reaching out and all of that and getting like a good mentor or mentors. And also, could you put your email in the chat so I could send you the Designing Your Life?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any comments? And thank you so much, Aaliyah. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the syllabus.
Yeah, I want to echo as well. This was just phenomenal.
Thanks, Mike.
Some of the details, and we actually, a lot of this model that you've described, I've been using with my scholars, and part of my research is on developing a holistic critical mentoring model. And this is what I do, and this is the work that I'm doing in my PhD work. And
Nice.
so I appreciate the resources that you've added, as well as the just this sense of the equity in relationship, that it's a two-way thing, and it's and building it as that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Regina, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking your time and participating and volunteering all of this great information and resources for everyone here. I'd like to thank everyone, Aaliyah, Paola, Victoria, Jalissa, Michael, Wallace. Thank you. We really, without your presence, we wouldn't be able to put on such great programming like this. You will see a survey coming soon. So please fill out the survey. Without your feedback, we wouldn't be able to provide, programming like this for you, considering the interest that you have. So in the last few minutes, just thank you. And if you need to reach out for us, reach out to, I've put my email in the chat. If you have any questions or concerns, or visit our website for more information. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much.